Well, we've just gotten into September 2023, which means episode-wise we're in the 20s for Super Sentai's current show, Osama Sentai KingOhger. At this point, you're most likely in one of these groups. 1, you haven't started it yet and are deciding if you should start it. 2, you haven't started it and are relying on Twitter to keep up. 3, you've been watching it and you absolutely love it. Or 4, you've been watching it and you're deciding if you should keep going. In this video, I'm more or less going to address the first and last groups because I'm going to go into what I like and what I dislike about our team of rambunctious royals and hopefully help you answer the question, should you watch KingOhger? Right off the heels of Avataro Sentai Dawn Brothers came the announcement of Osama Sentai KingOhger, a Sentai composed of kings from the different countries of a fantasy continent. This was and still is an ambitious concept, and it really flipped things around from what we had from Zenkaiger and Dawn Brothers. Both these series were more lighthearted in nature, and both worlds were a bit more grounded than KingOhger, since they were more or less based on the real world, save for the Kikanoids. But essentially, the premise of KingOhger revolves around the legend of the Guardian of Terra, aptly named KingOhger, who was formed by the unification of 5 countries in order to stop the rampage of the Bugnarok and a catastrophic event known as Kami no Ikari, or Wrath of God. Interestingly enough, this series puts a huge emphasis on the mecha not just as a vehicle by which our heroes do combat, but as sort of the opposite, like it itself is the main hero and it's something the Rangers have to work towards, albeit not for that long. Most times, the mecha really serves as a side aspect of the story, but this time it is right at its core, which is a refreshing take and in a way speaks more so on togetherness as a team aspect. But I got sidetracked. Our current story takes place long after the Wrath of God, where the Bugnarok are preparing to strike again, and to protect his friends from the danger, our orphaned hero Gira forcibly takes the mantle of Red from the king of Shukodam after witnessing his contempt for his citizens. Gira reunites the 4 kings so that they together can join forces, form KingOhger, and protect Terra from this new threat. Interesting premise, right? So let's get into what's good so far. The concept. Like I said, a team of kings is an ambitious concept. The stylization of this team is well done, in terms of both the ranger suits and the kings themselves. For a story like this, you need to have a lot of lore prepared, and KingOhger sets up each king in each country with a huge potential for storytelling, both on their own and as part of the team. I really like this idea, and I think it's a great way to showcase each king's individuality. And Rita is a really cool ranger. Just saying. The action. One of the first things you'll notice about the action is that the typical sparks you see flying from enemies has been replaced with a dark, liquidy, blood-like substance, which, you know, is probably blood. This little detail is a testament to KingOhger's fighting stylization. They're definitely not holding back any punches with the combat choreography, and it feels a bit more visceral, and the scenes are definitely very flashy. The mecha. Dawn no Nitaijin revolutionized the Sentai mecha concept with its high posability, allowing it to reenact the most epic poses from the show. While it was miles better than previous mecha, it still wasn't perfect, being limited in certain areas. KingOhger took that and went way further. The DX KingOhger is a highly posable figure to an even more insane degree. This is a great sign for Sentai mechas to come because hopefully we will see more mecha that aren't limited to just being immobile blocks. And I realize this comment is mainly on the DX toy version of the mecha, but style-wise, KingOhger is a pretty sick looking mech. The Henshin device. I love the Ohger caliber. After watching episode 1, I immediately put it in order to have this thing for myself. It's a great representation of the team on a majestic piece of weaponry. Aside from the looks, I really do love that when you start the Henshin, you start off with the bass theme, and as you press more of the buttons, the instruments continue to layer on top until you're left with an awesome standby theme. My friends made fun that it's like a bop it, but I don't care, because the standby theme is certainly a bop. So the points I just listed out were things that I liked about KingOhger, and it mostly refers to the points as concepts of the show, kind of at the surface level. Unfortunately, I feel that what bogs the show down is in each point's execution. So without further ado, here's what's bad. My first good point was praising the concept, and it is a solid concept. In my opinion, KingOhger falls short in executing this concept and doesn't really let it take off in an effective and meaningful way. Remember that line I said earlier? For a story like this, you need to have a lot of lore prepared, and KingOhger sets up each king in each country with a huge potential for storytelling. The lore and the storytelling is not a strong suit of this show. A lot of what happens in the story just doesn't feel believable. And I know what you're gonna say, this is a fantasy story, why are you searching for realism? I'm not looking for realism in that sense, but the way the characters think, progress, interact, it just doesn't feel solid or well thought out. And I think a big reason for this is because of the grand scale that KingOhger sets out to cover. And this takes me to my next point on the characters. This is a story about 5 kings, but no one really feels like a king. Don't get me wrong, they each have their own interesting quirks, but no one feels like they actually care about running their country. They're always just getting mixed up in each other's affairs as if their country will just stand on its own if they abandon their thrones for extended periods of time. I don't really buy them as kings, and I don't really buy them as a team either. It's that necessity for them to be affiliated with each of their countries that makes it a bit harder to see them as part of the same team. Maybe this would have worked out better as a writer concept? Who knows? But this detail refers to the kings specifically, but there are a lot of times where I just feel like no one moves forward logically, but I just have to suck it up, accept it, and let the story progress. Like that plot point about Gira being Rackley's brother, but for some reason no one could tell or knew about it. Yeah, that was believable. This is where the weakness in the writing really starts to take center stage. I was able to suspend my disbelief a lot with Dawn Brothers because it itself was so goofy. The nonsensical pieces didn't seem out of place. But in this setting, the nonsensical stuff sticks out like a sore thumb, and it's more difficult to stay immersed when the story can't decide whether it wants to take itself seriously or not. Alright, I know I praised the mecha at first, and I also praised the story's focus on the mecha as a core concept rather than a side piece. Pretty early on in the show though, we're shown that KingOhger really doesn't need any or all of the Rangers to form together, and I think that just feels weird. I was excited to see that we had a Gatai sequence pretty quickly, but it felt way too easy to obtain, and it just felt like it lessened the connection of the Rangers to the mecha and vice versa. Like if one Ranger can just call on all the Shoe Gods to combine, then really what's the point of everyone coming together? It sort of trivializes the weight and impact of the Gatai by having it so easily done, and this establishes a new relationship between Rangers and their mechs, for better or for worse. The combination feels more complete when each Ranger plays their part in the Gatai sequence, and it's a true sign of the teamwork they're supposed to convey. One could argue, like, that's the whole point, they need to come together. Then why is the Gatai without all Rangers even possible in the first place? Maybe it's trying to prove a point, or maybe it feels necessary to the storytelling, but like I said, it compromises the relationship between the Ranger and their mechs and trivializes the concept of combination. It also amuses me that it boasts 10 Shoe Gods to combine into KingOhger when God Ant, God Kumo, and God Tento are like pure accessories. These are the main weaknesses of KingOhger that stick out to me, and I do have some additional nitpicks that aren't necessarily deal breakers, but are worth mentioning. Okay, I probably sound like I'm contradicting myself a lot because my first nitpick is with the henshin. The Ohger caliber is great as a device. In execution, it can be really annoying. I remember there was this really high stakes emotional moment with Gira, and the music was equally emotional and really setting the scene. Then he starts to henshin, and the standby theme, as great as it is on its own, just muddles up the audio of the entire scene. And when he actually starts to transform, then it becomes such a mess. Music in henshin devices is a topic that I've both enjoyed and been frustrated with, but I suppose that's something for another day. Someone needs to balance the sound better for these scenes and make sure it doesn't ruin the flow and the emotions being conveyed. On the same subject, one of the first things I noticed about the kings using the Ohger caliber was the 2 different styles they use it. You either hit your color then red, or you hit a sequence of buttons starting from your color, and the order being red, blue, yellow, purple, and black, and then you finish it up with red. I was so confused when I saw these 2 styles being interchanged. Does using one or the other mean something different? Which is the correct way? I get that since this Sentai series doesn't really rely on a gimmick per se, they have to be creative in how they integrate all the Rangers into the singular device, but then at least agree on a method to do it. I guess the only reason one might choose one method over the other is because it feels a little bit more fidgety, but once again, this sort of trivializes the importance of consistency in the henshin sequence for me. Another downfall with taking on this ambitious concept is its reliance on CGI backgrounds. Because the story takes place in a fantastical land, a lot of IRL backgrounds are going to be unusable for most scenes. And most of the time, it isn't so bad, but there are definitely some times where the movement of the actors does not match a perspective of the background, and the immersion is instantly broken. Is there a better way to do this? I guess either build mostly real sets and limit the green screen, or have a more grounded concept? To be fair, I wasn't really confident in the CGI work anyways after those weird mecha fight sequences in Dawn Brothers. My last nitpick, which I'm sure many will disagree with me on if you haven't already disagreed with me so far, I cannot stand the voice for Spider Kumonos' henshin device. It is just so... why? I refuse to believe that someone listened to that weird, low-pitched, grating recording and said, yeah, let's roll with it. Ultimately, and unfortunately, I find myself in a 5th group from the ones I mentioned at the beginning of this video. I started it, and I dropped it. after like episode 23. I wanted to like it, I really did. I had so much fun with Dawn Brothers that I was really excited for KingOhger. And while I was drawn in by certain aspects of the show, I soon came to realize that those aspects were all superficial. There was a lot of care put into making the show look good, but does it feel good? In my opinion, KingOhger does a lot of things, but it doesn't do all of them very well. And as I kept watching, the little details that bothered me turned into huge flaws that kept taking me out of it and weakened my immersion and my ability to suspend my disbelief. It feels like A, KingOhger wants to tell a serious, mature story, but constantly gets the leash pulled back to remind itself that it's a kid's show, or B, the writers just aren't very good at finding the balance to tell their story effectively. Even with this recent time skip being introduced, it feels like KingOhger is attempting even more ambitious storytelling, and I can't help but feel less confident in that when they were barely able to keep their main story compelling.
And for those reasons, I'm out.
But you may be watching this and thinking, hey, I don't mind those things. You may be able to suspend your disbelief much easier than I can, and honestly, that ability is much needed when watching tokusatsu. Or maybe you just disagree with my points, which is just fine. This series isn't for me, but maybe it is for you. If you like the sleek suits, flashy action, and ambitious world building, give it a shot. But if your immersion breaks easily and you care a lot about a story's cohesion and logical flow, you may want to join me and sit this one out. And if you're on the fence, well, I guess it's up to you. If you keep up with it, I commend you. If you decide to drop it, you gave it a fair shot and you can make time for another show. Either way, I hope this deep dive and explanation of my personal views helps you decide if you should start, stop, or keep going with Osama Sentai KingOhger. Thanks for watching this video, and be sure to subscribe for more Toku content and follow me on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. See you all next time.